Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We have a very exciting topic today that I think will be valuable for all of you, and hopefully will give you a lot of great takeaways to bring with you back home and into the work that you do. My name is Anna Bager, and I'm the president and CEO of the OAAA. And I am delighted to be your moderator and host today, but I'm going to be speaking the least. I'll do a short intro and then we'll move into the research and then I'll be back with questions. And today we have a really timely topic ahead of us, the proven impact of out of home in today's media mix. Which is, of course, something that is all near and dear to our hearts. And as we navigate an increasingly fragmented media landscape with ad-free streaming, digital saturation, consumer fatigue, privacy issues, and audiences that are harder and harder to reach, we hear from brand marketers constantly what works, what moves the needle, and what gives us the best bang for the buck. So over the next hour, we will unpack insights from a 5-year study that Clear Channel Outdoor and Kantar did. And we'll compare the performance of out-of-home advertising with television, connected TV, and digital channels, and look at what drives awareness, favorability, purchase intent, and talk practical strategies for using out-of-home across the funnel. And again, it is a Clear Channel study together with Kantar, but I was so excited when Dan brought this to us because I think this is highly valuable for the whole industry, both media companies, buyers, and advertisers. So please lean in and listen carefully. But before we do, I want to introduce the panelists that we have with us today. First of all, Dan Levy, Executive Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer at Clear Channel Outdoor. Dan leads the company's overall marketing strategy and help brands connect with consumers through innovative out-of-home solutions. So perfect for this. And then we also have Joe Novak, Senior Vice President of Growth and Strategy at Kantar. Joe has over 15 years of experience in advertising research, strategy, and analytics. And we'll start, like I said, with Joe and Dan taking you through a deep dive into the study, and then we'll shift over to panel discussion, and after that, we'll open it up to your questions, which you can put in the chat. We already have some pre-planted questions through the registrations, but please feel free to ask, and if we can't get to all of your questions, we will make sure that we follow up after the webinar. We are also recording the session, so if anyone is interested in re-listening or want to share it or give someone a recommendation to listen to it, it will be on our website after the session. So with that, I'm going to let Joe and Dan take it away.
Cool. And just add to that, so just in terms of what we'll cover today. So while we'll be taking you guys through the normative learnings from the Clear Channel Outdoor ads that we've tested over the past 5 years, we're going to kick things off by just looking a little bit further into some research that we've done at Kantar, what we call media reactions. Well, the interesting thing is that we started media reactions as an annual survey with consumers and marketers back in 2000, which is the same time frame when we started this work with Clear Channel. So we can look at some of the trends over time and then also looking at the brand health results that we have for Clear Channel. So within this, we'll look at consumer and marketers' perceptions for out of home and just media channels in general. Then we'll dig a little bit deeper into what are the learnings that we have from the work that we've been doing with Clear Channel, and then implications for marketers. And then we'll move over to the panel and QA discussion. So for the content-wise, be about like 10-15 minutes for you guys to listen. So the first piece, so from our Kantar reactions work, what is the first thing that we've done with this is trying to understand what is the receptivity of consumers to a platform. So we've done validation work within out-of-home, social platforms, TV, just to name a few channels. And from that, trying to connect their receptivity, consumers' receptivity to the channel, and then brand performance. And what we've seen over time, and in this last round of research back in 2024, is that if a consumer is less receptive to a channel, we've seen that it's a less than 1% delta or change in the brand health that we're seeing here from a control exposed standpoint. And what we do see is that it's 7 times higher if a consumer is receptive to a certain platform. So the way to think about this is that, you know, the medium is part of the message. So if a consumer is receptive to take in ads from a particular platform or channel, we are going to see, you know, slightly higher brand health results. So something to keep in mind as we go through a few of these slides as it relates to out of home and other channels that were included within this research. What we've seen over time is that consumers are becoming more positive to ads. So over the start of the survey in 2000 up until this last year, we've seen it increase exponentially into about 47% at the moment. What does that relate to each individual channel? So when we look at US consumers' preference and receptivity amongst channels, we do see out of home in the top 10. So this is amongst 25 different channels that are asked within the survey. So it is a mix of out of home, TV, CTV, digital. Within digital, we have OLV display, connected TV, podcasts, streaming audio, streaming music, as well as social and a variety of different formats as well, just to name a few that we asked within the survey. But what we do see for out of home, it performs in the top 10, both digital out of home fourth, as well as out of home traditional in the seventh spot. So we do see the consumers in general are receptive to taking in ads from out of home type of placements. When we look a little bit deeper into this, we have a couple of slides looking at different demographics and audience groups. So when we look at age, across all different age cohorts, we see that digital out of home as well as out of home is a top preferred channel to receive ads from. So it can vary depending on Gen Z from boomers, but we see within Gen X and boomers, digital and regular traditional out of home are top channels. So again, something to keep in mind as we have this discussion today, as we discuss about how to think about out of home from a planning perspective and different audiences and where the receptivity might come from.
Hey, Joe, it's just jumping in real quickly on this last slide. I do think it's also worth calling out that for younger consumers, the only traditional media that's in that list is out of home. Everything else is either a brand experience or something that happens at an event, or in
Mhm.
the case of Gen Y and POS, something that happens at the point of transaction. So it is really worth pointing out that younger consumers have this kind of receptivity and preference for out of home as an ad delivery medium. The contrast to that is traditional media doesn't really rank high for them at all. Just wanted to flag that.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. We look a little bit further into a couple other demographics and category decision makers that we asked within the survey too. We do see that females find digital out of home their second preferred method of ads right behind POS. Higher and lower income, we see digital out of home and out of home within the top five. But the interesting thing is on the right-hand side, when we look at category decision makers or purchasers of the different categories, we do see digital out of home, be in the top five across a variety of these different categories. So if you look at luxury, that's the first preferred channel in terms of receptivity to ads. Entertainment, this is both in home as well as out of home. So it could be streaming in home, movies, concerts, those types of things that feed into that entertainment category. We have tourism and a lot of within the CPG space. So anything from household goods, beverage, non-alcoholic as well as alcoholic and cosmetics, a little bit within auto as well. So it's a mixture of different categories. So something to think about as well that as you have brands within these categories and different audiences, this is a channel, digital out of home, that is really receptive for audiences to take in and want to see these types of ads. So taking a step back, we've looked at like what consumers have preference for receptivity to different channels. And here's what we're talking to marketers within our survey. So within our ad reaction survey, we have surveys of over 1,000 respondents, a mixture of consumers and marketers. Marketers can come from standard advertisers, agencies, or more traditional media agencies as well. And what we've seen is that out of home for them is an innovative type of channel. Here on the left-hand side comes in the 3 spot versus cinema and TV sponsorships. But on the right-hand side, really the expectations for marketers is that out of home, both traditional as well as digital, is a good channel for getting consumer attention. And that's something that we're going to see as we get into the clear channel results in a little bit too, because as this is an expectation from marketers to capture attention, this is also something that we've seen live through the Clear Channel results in terms of breakthrough and ad awareness and being able to capture consumers' attention within market. So I'll give you guys just a little bit more background on the research and partnership that we've done with Clear Channel over the past 5 years. So this launched right around, I think, when the pandemic was started with you guys. So we've done 50 studies over the course of the past 5 years, a mixture of national, local campaigns, a variety of different formats as well. And within our market norms database, we made the comparisons for performance on a variety of brand health metrics from the Clear Channel studies to digital campaigns, connected TV campaigns, as well as linear. So the way to think about digital and how we're classifying it here, it's anything that could be tagged passively, OLV display, it could be streaming audio, those types of things. CTV is anything from smart TV, it can be an OEM, as well as a service that a consumer can watch on their TV. And linear TV is as it sounds. It's anything that's on broadcast. This doesn't include MVPDs or addressable, but all of our linear campaigns that we've measured during this period as well. And with Clear Channel, their data is a mixture of different categories. So a lot of what we saw earlier in terms of receptivity of categories, it's also what we're seeing here too. So they do advertise and what we've measured across a variety of categories for them over the past 5 years too.
And I do want to just flag for people on the call, many of the studies that Clear Channel conducts, we do on behalf of the clients or the agency partners, and it's full campaign, not just Clear Channel inventory. So some of the results are coming from inventory that's not owned or controlled by Clear Channel. This is about really truly getting to an understanding of the performance of the medium, not the performance of Clear Channel specific inventory. I just think that's really important that we're all kind of viewing this as not a Clear Channel thing. The fact that we took the lead on the research allows us to get to this point, but this is about the medium. And I know that there are a number of people on this call who work at other out-of-home media companies, many of whom are represented in some of this research.
Mm-hmm. And what were the top things that we saw from the research? So just going left to right. So we did see that the out-of-home ads do break through. So from when we saw what marketers said to us earlier from our media reaction survey, that it is a channel that they expect it to capture attention of consumers. And we are seeing that breaking through here. So in terms of significantly outperforming linear TV, digital, and CTV ads in terms of breakthrough, we also do see that out-of-home ads do perform well in terms of persuasion metrics as well. So nearly 4 times higher on brand favorability compared to digital as well as CTV ads. And we're also going to see within out of home compared to linear TV, while it is able to perform better in terms of breakthrough with ad awareness, we do see it performing slightly higher on intent. And that's something of interest we'll dig a little bit deeper in as well, and something to consider as you're making media plans, as this is a platform that can impact both upper and lower funnel metrics. So the next couple of slides, just want to dig a little bit deeper and show you guys the metrics for each of the different channels. So in this case, the main metrics that were asked compared to our norms that were also asked within the surveys. So aided awareness, ad awareness, message association, brand favorability, and purchase intent. And here on this slide, what we're doing is looking at the out-of-home norm compared to digital. And like we mentioned previously on the last slide, we do see ad awareness significantly outperforming, but then also on the right-hand side, your persuasion metrics. So we can see that out-of-home with the receptive audiences can impact these persuasion metrics. So both in terms of favorability as well as intent, compared to what we're seeing here on the digital deltas as part of the norm. Moving to CTV, we're seeing a very similar story. So in terms of breakthrough, we still see that ad awareness significantly outperforming CTV, but it's also very impactful in terms of message association and those other persuasion metrics. So brand favorability, purchase intent again. So across the board, we do see that out of home is very impactful in terms of brand building as it relates to comparison to digital as well as CTV. And then the last main slide that we have for you guys within the data is looking at out of home compared to linear TV. So what we're seeing here again, significantly outperforming on ad awareness and breakthrough potential. But then also what we have here on the purchase intent on the right-hand side. So we do see that out of home can, be at the same level as TV as it relates to impact for intent. So overall, we do see, like, from a consumer standpoint, out of home, both digital and traditional, are receptive. They prefer these ads. And we do see from a marketer standpoint that they want or expect that this channel capture attention, be innovative. And it's kind of what we're seeing with these out of home results in terms of impact as it relates to awareness, as well as even impactful on the persuasion metrics. The one last thing that we want to mention before we go into the final implications is that while you can have the right channels, we also want to make sure we have the right creatives to go with it. So from our standpoint, we know what makes really good out of home or outdoor advertising. So a lot of these principles here on this slide come from our linked database, creative testing for out of home. And these are just 5 basic principles. So it's really looking at instant impact, simple, you look again, brand at heart, and contextual proximity. So instant impact, the way to think about this is your ad coming through in the first 3 seconds? Is it something that somebody can notice immediately and capture and understand what the ad is for? Simple is just as it sounds. Is the message is very clear and concise, and is it really coming through? Is it easy to find with whatever format you have for outdoor? Is it easy for a person to capture that and to read it and to understand it? You look again. So is the ad engaging? Is it something that if they engage with in the first 3 seconds, are they engaging with it again? So are they coming back to it just in terms of visual or even the format that might be interesting or innovative that they want to look at? That also helps in terms of impact, performance, and market. Brand at heart. So is the branding visuals, are they included within the story of the ad? Are they prominent enough that a person can tie that back to this? So that's the other thing that we see across different mediums and ads that we test, is making sure that the brand is, the hero of the ad, and it's, a central focus of it. In contextual proximity, so is this connected, or the ads close to the final purchase for things? So is this also connected with POS? The ways to think about this is also going back to the category slide that we had earlier with things like non-alcoholic beverage and alcoholic beverage. While digital out of home performs in the top 5 of preferred ads, POS is also within there too. So the way to think about that is ways that we can connect our digital out of home or out of home placements with contextual proximity to POS to even further improve purchase intent or consideration, or even the final purchase of a particular category or brand that's being advertised.
And what you're getting at there, Joe, for me, I know we'll talk about it later as Sana gets back on, is about understanding not just the out-of-home exposure and the value of that, but the role that that plays in the broader mix, and understanding consumer journeys and experiences with brands. And so this research is really, really critical in terms of understanding that out-of-home can perform. Now what it does is it opens up the door to say, and what's the role that it should play on a brand by brand basis as far as the mix? How does out of home contribute to a mix, as opposed to asking maybe the question that we were asking 10 years ago as an industry, which is, does out of home work or not? I think we've proven that it works. This opens the door to dive deep and say, for this product, for this brand, for this campaign, what's the optimal role that out of home can play? We know it performs top of the funnel, as we'll get into in a little bit. For a lot of brands, it performs middle and lower funnel as well. So I'm excited to talk further about that.
Mm-hmm. And so what does this mean for marketers? So we talked about this a little bit earlier in terms of what we saw within the media reaction survey, but what else do we see from the out-of-home normative study that we've done? So it's kind of like what Dan had just mentioned. So ways to think about a diversified media strategy. So it's the way to think about how out-of-home could be incorporated with other channels within a full, media campaign for your clients. Out-of-home can fill some of the gaps that are left by performance-focused channels like digital and CTV. So if we're looking for brand building, like what we saw earlier, it can help improve both upper and lower funnel metrics, and can also complement, other channels within a media plan as well. And that leads into the last bullet that we have here as well. So it can deliver both upper and lower funnel metrics here. So it can, impact favorability, intent compared to CTV or digital, and then also being on par with TV as a way to drive intent as well within market. So those are the main findings that we have. Dan, I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add to this before we go into our panel discussion.
No, I appreciate the way you walk through it, Joe, and I appreciate the partnership with Kantar to be able to get to this understanding. To Anna's point, as she was setting up the call, not about Clear Channel, not about specific. This is about a medium that maybe has been undervalued in the marketplace for a long time. And to me, the work that Kantar has done here helps us as an industry move things a little bit further away from siloed thinking about out of home to thinking about really truly understanding the contribution that out of home can deliver on a client by client basis. So I'm excited about it. I'm excited to talk further about it.
Well, here, Dan. Well spoken, and thank you so much, Joe, and thank you, Dan, too. So yes, I want to dive into some questions here. I have quite a few for you. I think I'll touch on a lot of things that you talked about, but like I said in the beginning of the call, please contribute with questions if you have some that you want to ask. And again, if we don't get to all of them, we'll follow up later. But I want to start with, talking about undervalued. I think that one of the real big headline findings of this 5-year research is that out of home outperforms digital and CTV in brand favorability and awareness. So what's behind the stronger consumer connection, and how should brands interpret this shift? I'm asking both of you, so please dive in.
So I'm going to dive into this one. Sorry, Joe.
No, you can go ahead.
Well, to me, the answer is like take off your marketer hat and put on your consumer hat. Think about the way that we engage with brands and media types and the experience of being a consumer these days, where so much is about intrusive or hyper personalized advertising that frankly gets into a world where some consumers are pushing back on that. And some brands are pushing back on that, right? They're starting to realize that it's not just about the exposure, but it's about the quality of the exposure and what that does as far as leading to a stronger brand relationship. And so I think if you think about consumers these days, so much of that brand experience happens on a phone. And so I have my phone. I have my iPhone 14 Pro, I think. I love saying this. If anyone else has the exact same device and we put the devices next to each other, they would look like completely different devices because it's hyper personalized, right? It's not the phone, it's my phone. And you're going to shove ads on my phone? Like that's the consumer experience that I think we're dealing with here. The resistance a little bit to intrusive advertising. And then they see out of home and see out of home as a creative medium that exists in the real world, that to the point that Joe and I were talking about earlier, younger generations really value those real world experiences. And it's not getting in your face. It's giving you the opportunity to consume those brands and those messages along your journeys. I think it's really seen as a positive. And I think that positive is not only reflected in the receptivity research that Joe showed, but in the overall results that we're seeing here.
Mhm. Yeah, I think adding to that, just what Dan mentioned, just pushing ads on people. I think that's also one of the things, because and just for background on the media reactions work, so a lot of the slides that we shared were from 2025. So this data isn't available yet, so you guys are getting a sneak peek at it. It won't be available for another couple of weeks. But within that, we did see when you look at CTV or OLV or some of the other channels that advertisers are spending maybe more of their budgets behind, that's less receptive by consumers as well. So I think it's a lot of just how they interact with certain channels, what they're expecting from advertising. And I think in this case, yeah, with out of home, it's something that they're open to within like CTV or podcasts or streaming, or OLV. They're a little bit less receptive to wanting to see those ads. So that could also hurt your brand as well, depending on what's being advertised to them.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about that, how out of home it's just there, right? Like in your daily life. It's not something that interrupts your media consumption or something else that you're trying to do. So I think that in itself makes the medium more compelling for consumers. And we see that in other research that we do at the OAAA as well, such as our Harris poll, for example. But I think you partly answered this, but I want to dig a little deeper into it. So again, media clutter is real. I mean, it's everywhere. It's a really big thing. Consumers and audiences are harder to reach than ever. They don't want to see ads. They don't pay attention to ads, but they do hopefully pay attention to ours. So what do you think makes out of home uniquely suited to break through noise in comparison to other channels, and maybe even help other channels along the way as we can reach consumers?
So this is one of my little pet peeves that I talk about all the time. I think there's not a consumer on the planet that thinks in terms of media channels. Yeah, we as an industry obsess about media channels, and we're so focused on out of home versus other channels. And I think if we adopt the way that consumers view, it opens the door to a different way of thinking about the role that our medium can play. In other words, consumers aren't thinking about channels. They're thinking about brands, they're thinking about experiences, they're thinking about personalities, both individuals like influencers as well as brand personalities. And they're ultimately thinking about how those brands fit into their lives. And 70% of their waking hours in their lives are spent outside of the home. And so if we as marketers and we as an industry can start thinking not about structures, not about formats, not about our channel, but more about that consumer journey, those consumer experiences, I think what comes out of that is pretty clear understanding that out of home plays that role and plays that positive role along those journeys. One of the things I like to say, I'm meeting with clients or agency partners is you don't wake up in the morning and decide to take your kids to a different school, or you don't wake up in the morning and decide to go to a different work. Like we go on consistent journeys, and those consistent journeys are positive exposures to out of home because of what we were saying before, as far as the lack of intrusivity of it, the lack of kind of getting in your face. And that combination of consistent journeys leads to a frequency of exposure, which builds very positive exposures for the brands and to the data that Joe was just showing, leading to not just awareness, but actually getting you closer to that point of decision, that point of purchase.
Mhm.
So we talked a lot about the consumer now and what they like and what they don't like and what they see and what they don't see. But let's sort of take that back to the planner who has to plan their campaigns and are thinking about this in a slightly different way. Should be thinking the way about it that way that you just said, Dan. But still, CTV, for example, right? Like faces issues with ad-free streaming, frequency capping, definitely consumer fatigue. And meanwhile, again, out of home frequency delivers results. So how can planners reframe our frequency as a strength rather than a risk, which I think they do at a certain extent today?
Jay, you want to go first? I keep jumping in.
No, I'll let you go first because I think this ties
You're
into
good at it,
the other
Dan.
frequency stuff. Yeah,
So are you.
We've,
that's interesting on your side.
So we've done a lot of work on this. And we've all had that CTV experience where you're watching a show on an ad-supported platform and you see that same ad 7 times over the course of a 30-minute show. There's lots of great research that's been done that shows not only is that a bad consumer experience, but it actually leads to bad perceptions of the streaming platform and the advertising brand. Just to put a finer point on that, it does brand damage, not brand positive growth by having that overexposure and overfrequency. And yet on out of home, we've done a ton of work that shows a consistent correlation between frequency of exposure and the behavior you're trying to measure. The initial work that we've done on this has been around visits to physical locations. And we've seen time and time again, the more someone is exposed to the ad, the more likely it is that they visit the location that's advertised. And that's something that we feel really definitive about. And we have benchmarks and we can share that information with others. The thing that's really exciting for me is we've now done this with Kantar. So we haven't released this yet. So following what Joe was saying about the preview of the receptivity work, we've actually done studies now where we've got our first one with Kantar with a brand where we've shown frequency of exposure to out of home drives better performance on brand metrics. In other words, people respond to the surveys and feel more positively about the brands and have a higher awareness of the brands if they've been exposed to the campaign on out of home more than people who have not been exposed. And I just want to put a finer point on that. Out of home not only drives results, but for people who are going on those consistent journeys, who have the ability to see those ads on their daily journey and see them on a frequent basis, tend to perform better on brand surveys and feel more positively about the advertised brands than people who only see them a few times. It's a real strength of out of home.
Mhm. And tied to that, I think what's interesting and why we're excited about this partnership as well, being able to show those results, it's kind of puts it on the playing field that we have with other passive ways that we're tracking. So in this case, we are can passively track with Clear Channel and looking at exposure and have those exposure buckets. But then also it's kind of similar to what we have with, legacy digital CTV measurement and having passively tracked from tags or direct integrations and be able to look at frequency. So hopefully, as we do more research and able to looking at frequency as another part of the analysis, there might be something down the road too where that's part of our normative view as well, because we are able to look at frequency by digital CTV at the moment, and then having with out of home will be interesting too to see how that improves over time, or depending if you do see different thresholds for frequency. So that'd be something interesting in results in the future too.
And just so everyone understands, like at Clear Channel, we have a data platform that we call Radar, and we see persistently devices that are exposed to our inventory, that exposure data to understand who's been exposed to a campaign. We've done an integration with Kantar, so we have the ability to help them understand that exposed audience, which gets us to an understanding of frequency, and align that with their panel data to be able to understand respondents who fall into that exposed audience versus those who haven't. So it just comes from a deeper integration and a long-term partnership that we've had with Kantar that gives us the ability to now open the door to start to understand, wow, does frequency drive performance with brand work, just like we know that it drives performance with visits.
And less relying on self-reported as well. So I think having
Exactly.
passive way to tracking is always the way that we'd love to work with clients, and having that now it's great that we can have and start incorporating within our final results then.
Yeah, it's for me, I've been in the industry 6 years. It's really interesting how far we've come in just analytics and how we can create better proof points for the medium, and how it again ties to other media platforms too. I think this research is great. That we're making really great strides in general as an industry, and really proving the point. So I want to kind of go back to again, like the planner, right? Like so, and the purchase intent that we can drive. So the study shows that out of home can really rival or even beat television when it comes to awareness and purchase intent. So again, for brands and agencies, how should they change the way they think about television versus out of home when it comes to budget allocations?
I can start. Yeah, we'll start this one. I think it goes back to some of the results we showed earlier. It's probably what is the objective of the campaign that they're looking at to begin with, and the different audiences. Because like for us, we did see, just even from some of the media reactions work, looking at the different age groups, gender, category decision makers, those types of things. So I think it depends on the overall campaign objectives. If it is to improve intent, what are the different audiences that they're going after, and then making that comparison to like some of the past research that we've seen that can help improve based on consumers' receptivity just to this channel. Because the other thing is, like I mentioned, with these results that will come out, you'll see the full, view of all 25 channels that we had within it. Broadcast or TV, a little bit less receptive by consumers, which makes sense, as digital out of home a little bit more innovative compared to something that's been around for however many years. So I think it's a mixture of understanding your audience, and how out of home can just play a small part to the overall campaign then.
And I'd love for it to be a large part of the overall campaign,
Yeah.
but I'm biased.
Yeah.
No, but so the way that I look at it, Anna, like I don't frame it around TV versus out of home. I frame it around TV and out of home. I really think that we're at a point in time where marketers need to think holistically about campaign measurement and not just measure out of home in a silo. And I'm saying that recognizing that the work that Joe spoke about is literally measuring out of home as an independent medium. I think the key though is we are set up as an industry, and many of the players, including Clear Channel, are set up to actually be able to contribute data to multi-touch attribution models to really truly understand, not is it out of home versus TV, but for a campaign where TV is part of the mix, how does out of home added to that mix drive incremental performance? How does it contribute to better performance for that brand? And I really think that comes down to not making it about out of home or TV, but how they come together. Now, that being said, TV's got bigger budgets. So we do have an opportunity to go in and say, at a time when most consumers are not watching live television commercials outside of sports and events and things like that, when most consumers have access to television content that they can, if they choose to, watch without advertising, it becomes actually more of an imperative these days for brands, for agencies, for planners to think broadly about journeys, to think about audiences you're trying to reach and the outcomes you're trying to drive, and the role that out of home can play when television results continue to decline. And when, let's be honest, CTV is not a direct replacement for linear TV.
No, definitely not. And I think, we often talk about out of home as kind of a glue, right, between the living room and once you finally get to the store, right? Because we can both reach audiences that could be harder to reach, as television audiences aren't the same. And in CTV, you might not know as much about the audience you're reaching either. So the ability to, for example, retarget based on location or leveraging our medium to create, just more frequency and more repetition of the message is a really good one. And then the ability to target contextually too, because you know a lot about the audiences in a different way when you're in out of home, is very, very powerful. And to your point, Dan, um, I think it's about optimization, right? So definitely it's out of home but what is that mix? And again, as we're becoming more and more digital too, and the ability to use data, you can do that much more in real time. And therefore you can make campaigns perform a lot better with out of home and probably also measure that in a more efficient way. Um, so I want to go back to sort of talking about the performance channels because your research warns about diminishing returns when brands go all in on performance. How can out of home help or out of home and help build long-term demand while driving short-term results?
So
Okay. Okay. You go. I'll let you go.
I can keep doing this all day long. I go back to a few weeks ago. Bose, the speaker and headphone company, the audio equipment company, announced that they're walking away from search marketing. They're putting all their money into brand. And I think that's a really telling signal from a marketer that has been really dependent upon performance marketing that it can't last forever, right? If you think about performance marketing, is really effective at squeezing performance out of a fixed group of people. Now, if you're talking about TikTok, you're talking about Meta, it's a very large community, but it's still a limited community. I'm not on TikTok. Doesn't matter how much you market on TikTok, you're not going to get me, right? And so I think what we're seeing now is more and more brands are realizing that it's not about performance or brand. It's about recognizing that if you're not focusing on the health of your brand, if you're not focusing on making sure that you're growing brand salience and brand meaning and brand positivity with consumers, at some point your performance marketing is going to go smaller and smaller and smaller in terms of its value. Or another way of saying that, like so many brands are seeing from search these days, that performance is going to get more and more expensive for you to drive. So it's really about how do you feed that top of the funnel? And the way that you feed that top of the performance funnel is by making sure that you have a healthy brand that's seen by more people, that's actually expanding the universe of potential customers as opposed to just mining that fixed universe.
Mhm. Yeah, tied to that. It's similar to our framework here. So meaningful, different, salient. It's kind of what you're mentioning, Dan. So like the different metrics that we're measuring, it's kind of what the message that you want to get out and being able to just be in front of consumers. So I think that's all tied all tied together with how we're measuring it.
All right, thank you. Dan, I have a question for you because, this is a lot about brand building and selling national advertising in out of home. But it's not just that in out of home. A big part of what we're doing is on the local side. And I just want to ask you specifically, we have a lot of people on this call. I think we have probably close to 500 by now. So, how are you seeing local sellers, whether they're selling national locally or local locally, leveraging this data to more success?
So I love the question. There's actually a question in the Q&A that was submitted by someone on the call asking a similar question about what's the best way to present this to direct clients in smaller markets that don't use agencies. I've been on the road for weeks talking about this. I've been meeting with local agencies and local clients. This is not just a New York and LA thing, and it's not just a Clear Channel thing. It's about the medium and the performance of the medium. And so I've yet to present this research to anyone in any market, whether it's brand direct, agencies, whether it's planning teams, buying teams, people who are responsible for multimedia or just out of home, I've yet to present this to people whose heads didn't start nodding because it speaks to the experiences that we all have, both as marketers as well as consumers. This isn't saying that out of home is the silver bullet that will solve every plan. What I think it's doing is challenging marketers, challenging agencies to maybe consider the mix that they're using and the way that they're relying upon media types. And is there a better way to, I'm going to use the word that you just used a few minutes ago, Anna, optimize that plan? How do you get the most value out of the investment that you or your clients are making in media types? And if you think about the consumer experience, I love telling this story. My wife and I were watching a streaming platform recently, ad-supported streaming platform, and apparently we drive a Dodge Ram truck. We have eczema, and neither of us have college degrees because those are the ads that were shown to us. Those three advertisers did not get the value that they are intending to get out of the investment on that platform. That doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean the platform is being done poorly. It doesn't mean that the targeting is bad. It just means it's not one-to-one and it's not effective, right? So in that environment where the wrong ads are being shown to the wrong people, oftentimes frequently in the same viewing experience, can out of home maybe be added to that mix? And that applies locally as well as nationally. That applies to small brands as well as large brands. This isn't about buying 100% of your campaign and out of home. It's about thinking about the audience you're trying to reach, how effectively that you are reaching them, and what the ultimate impact is of that campaign. And I think this really does speak to the overwhelming value that out of home can bring to more and more marketers if they'll maybe open up the thinking a little bit more broadly beyond channels to think about what's the most effective way to engage with the customers you're trying to reach.
Yeah. So I'm going to switch over. We have a lot of questions from the audience, and I also have some given ones through the registration. So I want to shift over to that. The first one I think is interesting. We touched on it a little bit, but it's a recurring topic for us, for you, Dan, for sure. How do we improve our attribution model to compete with the dashboards and data that are commonplace in the digital space? And that comes again to the out of home and the media mix. What can we do?
I have a biased point of view, just because of what we've chosen to do in the strategy we've deployed at Clear Channel, where there's a lot of really, really good, important work that's being done in out-of-home measurement that's being outsourced. There are third parties that can do really great work, Kantar being one of them. And I encourage everybody, if you're looking to do brand surveys, to reach out to Joe, and Kantar is a phenomenal partner. But the integration that we've done of our data platform differentiates our capability to go deeper. And I do think that's ultimately about where we need to go. We need to go away from measuring out of home to providing data and measurement that can be input into models that the agencies are using, that the brands are using. We need to think more holistically about understanding that value, that out of home exposure, that touch point. And what does that say in terms of the ability to drive performance? And then ultimately, what can we do to actually drive optimization? We have a product that we're rolling out right now that we call in-flight insights. It basically gives the ability to provide insights into campaign performance while the campaign is running, as opposed to post-campaign measurement, which is the overwhelming majority of what's done in out of home. That doesn't mean post-campaign measurement is bad. That means we need to continue to move things forward and continue to innovate. And being able to provide clients with data while the campaign's running opens the door to be able to say, what have we learned? What does this say? Is it performing the way that we need to? Are there things that we can do to either drive better performance or to optimize that performance? And that's the kind of conversation I think we ultimately need to be having to open the door to make it not about campaign studies or post-campaign measurement, but really truly understanding not just that it worked, but how does that home contribute?
Yeah. And what do we do now? Not just what did we learn and what
And
do we do?
keep moving that forward. Exactly.
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay, another question here that I think is really interesting. It was asked before. I don't know if it's the same person asked the same question two times, but it's been posed both in the feed and in the pre-planted. Um, how should we think about formats in totality? And this is for out-of-home formats, not for the broader media mix. Should there be more collaboration between formats? Impact of out-of-home in the mix, coupled with out-of-home place-based and billboards, working together, so to speak. How do we, again, we can reach such huge audiences if we, especially if we collaborate between all the formats. I would argue we could reach more larger audiences than any other media format. How should we think about that? And can this data be parsed between the traditional out of home and place-based?
That's Joe.
Yeah, I think just in terms of even if we lean back on our best practices, just in terms of having um, the mixture of just having the right message by the different formats, I think can, really provide greater impact. So it's kind of like what you guys were mentioning earlier in terms of just looking at out of home with different channels, more of like the synergy and how to optimize. I think you can also do that with an out of home itself as well. So it's making sure like the placements, the look and feel, the messaging, it's all aligned, and having that can provide the greater impact in terms of brand health. So I think, yeah, just in terms of the various formats, following the same type of creative learnings that we've seen in the past, and if you can apply that to the variations, I think that can, really impact a brand and help it grow from being exposed to market then.
And building on what Joe was saying, again, the segmentation within our minds of place-based from out of home or place-based versus billboards is the fundamental first step of getting in that direction that you're going into the question you're getting at, which is we can't think that way. The person who walks into a grocery store and sees a screen, or goes into their office building and gets into an elevator and sees a Captivate screen, or is filling up their gas tank and sees a GSTV screen, is not thinking of them as grocery TV, Captivate, or GSTV. They're thinking of them as experiences with content and brand. The imperative, I think, is on grocery TV, GSTV, and Captivate and others on the place-based side to embrace measurement in a way that allows them to participate, just like we're trying to do with the broader, like large format roadside billboards that we tend to measure. We're going through the exact same thing at Clear Channel with our airports business, where we want to be able to help our advertisers understand that those same business decision makers that they're reaching in an airport are still business decision makers when they're taking their kids to school, right? It's about shifting as an industry away from screens and formats or place-based versus traditional to think about consumers on journeys with brand experiences that ultimately lead to measurable outcomes. And the more we break that down in our heads, and the more we break that down operationally, I think the less we're going to see this as a blocker or something that we need to do as an industry, because it won't matter whether the exposure happened on a GSTV screen or on a billboard on 95. It's about the experience that the consumer has when they're exposed to that brand and what do they do afterwards.
Yeah, and equally, it's not just the consumer, right? It's the brand too. They want to buy audiences out of home, especially as they have a hard time reaching audiences on television, for example, right? Like, how do they reach all those audiences in out of home in a way that we kind of, as a medium, can actually deliver? I think that that's going to be really key for our success going forward because, again, it's the same consumer in different environments, but we can capture and catch them in so many different places and really kind of follow along. And given how favorable they are to our ads, I think that could be a very efficient way for us to operate rather than in small silos. Um, okay, what role does programmatic out of home play in this scenario, and how do you think traditional digital out of home migration to programmatic out of home or digital out of home, I guess, uh, will improve the overall out of home strategies?
Programmatic is critically important to our growth. We see that on all the data that the OAAA releases, the projections that others are putting out there. Programmatic and digital are driving a significant amount of growth for our industry. And it's still a subset. It's still a piece of the puzzle. And so it's not a coincidence that all the measurement solutions that we've built at Clear Channel are independent of buying channel or formatted display. We don't differentiate between a printed billboard and a digital bulletin. We don't differentiate between a campaign that was bought direct or something that was bought programmatically, because what we're focusing on is that exposure. And I do want to clarify, and I think this is one of the questions that was in the Q&A. One of the things that Clear Channel brought to market and now is done consistently across our industry is when measuring digital out-of-home campaigns, whether programmatic or direct, we measure the ad exposure, not the structure or the screen that it's on, right? There's an alignment of ad server data with the exposure data to make sure that we're looking at the audience that had the opportunity to see that campaign. And so from a technical standpoint, we've already kind of checked that box and we understand. And we've got great partners on the programmatic side of the house and the Vistars and Place Exchange and all of those that are doing similar good work holistically. So I think it's about same issues we've been talking about, not about the screen, not about the transaction type. It's about the audience exposure and the value of understanding what happens after that exposure.
Yeah. It's a blessing and a curse that we're so many different things, and we think of ourselves that way. We really, we could do better working together. Um, This question I really think is interesting, and it's definitely something we're thinking a lot about right now at the OAAA, and I'm sure in most of our member companies. Speaking of leveraging out of home to fill gaps in other mediums of the marketing mix, how does out of home impact internet/Google search performance for a client's campaign? Is there any data that can be provided on this? And I think this is really interesting in the world we're living in right now when publishers are struggling with AI and search engine optimization. And out of home isn't really faced with a lot of those issues. So where do we fit in there? And do we, I don't know that we will have data, I can guarantee you, because we're looking into it, but what are your thoughts on that, if any?
Yeah.
Joe,
You
Dan?
want to take that one?
Yeah, I definitely think there's applications for out of home because I mean, if you look back, instead of just doing a search from being on it, there was the whole QR code, phase of trying to do that with different things and just search that way. And I think this way there is what we've seen from an intent standpoint. It is something that can drive those persuasion metrics. So I definitely do think if the ads are interesting, noticeable, they can drive those types of things or those types of actions. On our side, I'm just trying to think if we've done anything tied to that particular medium at the moment. I don't think we have any research, but yeah, there's definitely some things that can, look in the future of, exposure to it and then looking at those actions after the fact, if search or whatever other behaviors too.
So I want to address this on top of what Joe said in two ways. The first is the OAAA has already done some great research on this. I think it was Harris Poll May in Morning Consult. I can't remember, but the OAAA did a study that looked at trying to equalize spend in terms of the performance. So another way of saying that is dollar for dollar, which medium drives best performance when it comes to search and digital and mobile behavior. And the findings were that out of home, dollar for dollar, drives that best performance. So you've got that kind of high level work that the OAAA has already done to show that people take action when they see something on a billboard. And that action oftentimes is search. The other side of it, though, we are very focused on this at Clear Channel right now. And we've done some initial work that looks at the impact of a campaign starting an out of home on top of the funnel search activity. In other words, none of us are in a position to impact what happens when someone goes to Google and searches, because that comes down to the SEO and the SEM for the individual brands. But what we as an industry can impact is getting more people to search. And the initial work that we've done shows definitively that when you start advertising it out of home, there's a pop in search activity for the brand, for the category, for the product. We haven't released this because we're trying to dive deeper into understanding not just the pop, but the sustainability of it. But it is something we're squarely focused on, especially at a time when a significant percentage of search these days doesn't result in a consumer clicking on a link because they're getting the answer. That's to talk about going from search engines to answer engines. And so that really is impacting our customers. So I'm having this conversation with customers. This goes back to the question before about local. When I'm meeting with clients and agency partners locally, this is the number one question that I ask is, are you seeing this? More and more of our customers are sharing with us that their search performance is being negatively impacted by AI. Is that impacting you? Because if so, we should be thinking about out of home as a way to drive better performance, to not necessarily mitigate for all the changes that are happening because of AI, but certainly as a way of influencing that and getting more and more people to think top of mind. And think about it. People see billboards, they see out of home ads, and they don't need to be trained anymore. Remember back in the day, we used to have look for us at www dot or follow us on like all kinds. We don't need to do that anymore because we've got an entire generation, multiple generations that have been trained that when you see something in the real world, check it out on your phone, search for further, right? Well, if you align the keywords that are important to you with search, with the language that you're using on billboards, it makes sense that that would have a positive impact on people searching for those keywords and brands and types of ideas that you're featuring on your billboards. At Clear Channel, we're just trying to prove that now. We know it makes sense. It's logical. Now we just want to be able to come back with the data.
No, but and I think as an industry, we should do more of that research because I think it's increasingly important to drive consumers to websites and to find out more information. I also think we're probably the only medium where, our ads are going to show up no matter what, right? Like it's again, AI is completely changing the playing field for publishers. Pretty much anyone, even TikTok and Instagram and others are struggling today. And for all you said, Dan, you're only in one channel. We reach everyone and we're everywhere. So I think coming into a new world here now, I think it's an opportunity for the industry because you can't skip us, you can't block us. We're always there for good, for better or worse. All right. Well, thank you for that. This was really great. I'm just going to wrap with one final question because unfortunately we are coming up on time. And again, we'll try and respond to all of your questions. We got a lot. But for both of you, if you could leave this audience of, media owners, agencies, brands, and tech providers, we have a pretty large mix on the call today. If you could leave them with one clear takeaway for the next year or two, and from the data you have right here, what would that be?
Go first, Joe.
So, I mean, mine's pretty simple and concise that, out of home is, a good brand building platform and consumers are really receptive to it.
Dan?
I'm going to build on that. I'll tell you what I tell our teams. I do a lot of visits with our local sales teams, and one of the things I try and get them to embrace is this idea that advertisers don't really buy ads. They buy a means to deliver a message to a certain audience to try and get that audience to exhibit a certain behavior. They transact for the ads. But what they're really trying to do is influence people's behavior. And so we as an industry, the more we can get away from thinking about structures and formats and instead think about the audiences that consumers are trying to reach and how do you most effectively influence the way that they think about and act on brands. I think if you think that way, you're going to be led to out of home, not just because of the amazing work that Kantar has done and the research that Joe showed, but broadly, we have proven as an industry the efficacy of out of home and the role that it can play in impacting consumer behavior. Now we need to just be able to put that more into the mix higher up. We need to put that more into the strategy, not just the buying. And I think that becomes the biggest opportunity for all of us, whether we're media owners, clients, or the agencies themselves. Let's think about the audience and the outcomes that we're driving.
Yeah, well, thank you. Very well spoken. I think one way to that is through just this type of research and the webinar that we had today. I know a lot of our members are conducting great research, and again, it will help your company, but it will also help the industry. So please bring them to us. I want to thank you so much, Dan, and thank you, Joe, both for doing this research for the industry, and also for such a great webinar. It was a true pleasure to have you here. And thank you for everyone who joined us. Again, it's being recorded, so you can go back and take a look at it later if you want to, or if you want to recommend it to anyone. And I'm sure that at least excerpts of the research will be also shareable by Clear Channel or Kantar. So reach out to Dan or Joe if you want that. Thank you, everyone, and see you in the next one.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Anna.
Cool.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Joe.
Thanks.